Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Be My Guest, episode 2. We made it to a second episode. I didn't give up yet. So the first one went really well, I felt, but I had to bring back bring in, I should say, a person who I really look up to in this kind of hotel medium space. And she's been really kind to give us some of her time because she is a very busy lady. She was just telling me she was doing a podcast for someone in France, and she lives in California. So all hours of the day, Sarah is up. And this is Sarah Dandashy from AskAConcierge.tv, social media channels, Ask a Concierge. She is going to bring so much energy. If you're not familiar with her and any of her other works, she is just the biggest ball of positive energy you're going to find out there. And even through a lot of these challenging COVID times, you see her on different podcasts, different shows. She's working with Marriott, and it's always just up, energy, happy. So she's going to bring some of that to be my guest because I don't have enough of it. I don't have enough of it with all the stuff I'm doing aside from this. I'm trying to get this thing rolling. So at the very least, she can expose you, the listener, to someone who actually really brings that positive emotion, because me over here is Negative Nancy on the New Jersey side, just probably not doing it for you. So just a little refresh if you haven't listened to the first episode. Again, this is only episode number 2, so we're moving along. But the concept to Be My Guest is really to kind of tell hotel stories, right? We do a lot of work with the news, and certainly a lot of news out there, good, bad, however you want to look at it. But we want to tell the stories behind the hotelier, behind the hotel scenes, because during these really challenging times that are still happening and are going to unfortunately be happening for a while, it can feel very lonely and it can feel very isolating. So hopefully if you are someone out there listening that is feeling that way, kind of peeling back some layers to these hospitality professionals that we're going to be talking to. Maybe you can relate to somebody. Maybe you can relate to something. Maybe you really connect with somebody as a guest and you reach out to them and start getting some advice. There's all these different things that are available to you. But the one thing I always want to mention is this is an open forum. And what I mean by open forum is that I'm not really picking and choosing guests, right? I'm going to really allow this to be open to anybody who wants to join. So it's not just hoteliers. It could be people in airlines, cruises, OTAs, travel agencies, FITs, restaurants, anything, banquet spaces. If you work in hospitality and you want to come on and just tell your story, feel free to reach out to me on my LinkedIn address. You see it right there at the bottom. I'm always looking for new people to come on the show. Got some great shows lined up after Sarah as well. But it really is a place where anybody can get their message out, tell their story. Let's have a nice, positive conversation and really kind of bond together. And I look forward to having you be my guest. But without further ado, let's bring in the one and only Sarah Dandashy. Sarah, how do you make time for me with all the other things you're doing with all these big people? Little old me got some of your time.
You know what? You caught me at a weak moment, and I felt like being really kind.
I know. Well, let me tell you, it honestly is an honor. You know, we've been working on and off with some other things that we've been doing in terms of No Vacancy and other podcasts that you've been on. Of course, you see you on Rupesh, see you on your stuff that you do on your regular channels. So to get you onto my show as my number 2, episode 2, without even a proof of concept, you join me.
You are the proof of concept. Okay.
Well, in your judgment, we have to work on that. I don't know, but
I know it's all right. It's okay. Hey, it's 2020. Everybody's judgment is a little off.
That's true. That's true. Well, again, thank you for being my guest today. And again, for those who aren't really familiar with Sarah's work, she's been really developing this Ask a Concierge platform for years, right? It's not something she just started in 2020 because of COVID. It's something she's been working on for a long time. And she's really built a great following, and she's bringing some of the most amazing content with the most amazing personality. So if you haven't seen it or heard it before, make sure you check it out. Sarah's going to list off some of the ways you can connect with her a little bit later. But Sarah, give me a quick background on Ask a Concierge and kind of how this whole thing developed.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I love that you kind of brought that to light, because I think all too often it's so easy to look at people. And, you know, again, we're always judging people by what is their highlight reel, and, you know, really to take into consideration maybe the length of time that they've been working on something or how much work they're putting towards something. So yeah, Ask a Concierge has really been my baby for gosh, I mean, it really kind of started as a very inkling of a concept in 2012. So we're looking at 8 years here. And a bit of backstory on myself. You know, I've worked in the hospitality space for almost 20 years. I don't want to admit that I'm that old, but I've been a concierge for over 15 years. And I started when I was really young, ish. And so I was a concierge for 15 years, but I also have had a background in film and TV. And kind of as I was developing, this sort of concept, in all honesty, I was actually taking a writing course, and the instructor was like, everybody needs to do a video blog. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, talk about something that you're an expert in. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I like working out and like eating healthy, but I'm like that. I'm not that guru. Like that. No. And I'm like, you know what? It's just an assignment. It's not that big of a deal. I'll just talk about the stuff I talk about on a regular basis, like what to eat, see, and do in Los Angeles. It'll just be an assignment. Cool. I'll call it Ask a Concierge, and we'll be done with that. So literally just like pulled it out of my hat for an assignment. And I'll never forget. And I like sharing this story for a couple of reasons, but I'll never forget that when I first shared the first video, looking at everybody in the room, and they're like, this was really great. Now, by the way, that video still exists out there, and I wear a ridiculous scarf, and I look like a flight attendant from the—
And you haven't sent that to me yet?
Sorry.
I thought we were friends.
Sorry, I want you to sleep at night. That's why. So you will not otherwise. So when I saw their reaction, all of a sudden I had this light bulb moment that, oh, wait a second. All of you, they all live in Los Angeles, and they find this information interesting. Maybe I'm onto something, and it's a little bit more of a broader audience that I can reach. And so I share this because all too often we find that, maybe our areas of expertise, or especially right now when we're kind of like reconfiguring and trying to figure out like, what can we bring to the table, or what is our personal brand? And all too often the thing that we might be like an expert in, or what we can really talk a lot about and we can bring and add value to other people, is right in front of us. And we don't really give it that much weight. So that being said, it started snowballing from there. It's definitely, it's been some time also, and grew from me just covering Los Angeles to then working with destinations around the world, and then as well as, big travel brands from Marriott, Charisma Hotels and Resorts, cruise lines, you name it. So it's been a very exciting journey. And then it changed this year because I was able to go and travel, but now with everything coming to a screeching halt, I did have to take a moment to kind of stop and redirect. And so for those people that are discovering me now in 2020, I almost feel like it's like another incarnation of what Ask a Concierge is, because I had to evolve with the times. And in essence, like whether one could argue whether it's the limitations or the parameters in which 2020 is allowing us to play.
Yeah, no, and I think you bring up a great point, right? That you talked about, you really initially were into that radio TV space, and that's kind of where you wanted to, initially move your career towards. And you got into hotels, and I won't say you stayed there, but you stayed there, right? And that's something very similar to what I did, where I was undergrad for radio and TV broadcast journalism, and coming out of school was right after the 2008 crash, and radio and TV jobs were few and far between. They certainly weren't paying much. So, I got into hotels out of more necessity, and same kind of idea. I stayed in it, loved it. But to your point, a lot of times people, especially in hotels or in hospitality, because a lot of times that's not your first inclination, right? You won't meet too many people that in the industry that say, this is what I want to do from the start. There certainly are plenty of them, but a lot of times you hear people say, I want to do something else, and I found myself there. And we kind of lose sight of that, right? I'm a perfect example of that, where as I was moving my career up in hotels, I really still enjoyed broadcast journalism, but I kind of stopped doing everything with it because I was focused on that hotel business.
Of course.
And this break because of COVID kind of gave me a chance to work on things and re-spark that interest, which is the point of Be My Guest and what I do with Glenn and Anthony and other different things that I've been working on. But tell me, because you started as a concierge about 8 years ago, but you were still working in hotels, right?
Yeah.
So you had to make that dual effort. So what did you kind of went into that mindset? And if someone's out there that has another passion, but they've turned away from it because of their work, and obviously everyone's different situations may impact that decision, but what went into your mindset to say, you know what, I know I'm working at a hotel. I know it's a lot because I'm a concierge at that. I can still make this happen.
You know, as far as the notion of like, I can still make this happen, there was never, I can still, it's like, I have to make this happen. Because for me, that is like where my passion is in storytelling. So that is why there was always this natural inclination towards, and storytelling and that creative side of like putting it together, which is why I had that background in film and TV, but also why it was somewhat fulfilling to be a concierge, because you do end up taking guests on a journey. So even though it wasn't maybe not the end goal, but it was fulfilling. Now that being said, I knew that like I have a greater story to tell, like more, and it's, so I just had to do the work. So it's not pretty, or as I say, I was like, hard work isn't sexy, but it's like, it's true. And then I would, choose night shifts, for example. So I'd go into work at like 2:30, but I'd be up at like 6 a.m. and I'd get a workout in, I'd do like my meetings or shoots or whatever I needed to do, set everything up so that my freshest part of the day was devoted to me building my brand. And then in the latter part of the day, anything that I could tie up loose ends while I was at the desk, sure. Or obviously, certainly like being at work as well too. So it does take a lot of sacrifices, but if you know that you're like, I have to do this, like you'll make that happen. Now, that being said, I didn't have like a family that I had to also, care for. There are a lot of things that can make that difficult, but where you can try to find that extra time or that way to sort of multitask, it makes it so much more rewarding. So yeah, I mean, I have definitely been juggling quite a lot for many years.
Well, do you feel, because again, you're having a lot on your plate, right?
Yeah.
And people can get overwhelmed. They can certainly get frustrated. I'm sure there were plenty of times where you were just banging your head against the wall.
100%.
But do you find that putting in that extra work towards a passion of yours gave you some of that fulfilling feeling and maybe a mental refresh, even though you're going a mile a minute?
Oh, 100%. I mean, let's be honest. Okay, look, hospitality it's hard. It's hard. I mean, it's great. And there are a lot of wonderful, beautiful moments from it. But especially if you've been doing it for quite some time, and several years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it's the newness of it isn't there. And so how do you stay fresh? Everybody needs to find these ways to stay fresh, because for your job, like you need that, and the guest needs that. So what I found is, as I was getting excited about this and maybe rediscovering places, whether it was in Los Angeles, whether it was elsewhere, it made me more excited about my day job, in essence, working at the hotel. So yes, it was a lot of work. Yes, there were long hours, but it kind of, when you get excited, when you get excited, that you just you're reinvigorated and you have this extra energy and you're like, okay. And then you just take those moments so that when you have those small wins, to be like, okay, it's like a step in the right direction. But to go on the point of what you were also saying, were there many difficult times, at times where I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Is all of this work for anything? Yeah, there were many, many times that it's like you like go to bed and you're just like, oh gosh, I have to cover my head, and I'm like, what am I doing? But you find that moment to unplug, and then you just kind of like reset yourself, and it's like, okay, maybe we just do something a little bit more relaxing today, and then tomorrow you get it back into it. So
what pushed you through those moments?
A couple of things. One, well, first of all, I kind of know myself, so I kind of like go like 120, or like I have to like really be off the gas. And I also like burn out 3 times a year. People are like, you burn out? I'm like, yeah, 3 times a year. It happens all the time. Like it'll happen like March-ish, March, April. It'll happen again like in July, August. And
So you schedule them too.
Yeah, pretty. I'd say so. I'm like in like the 3rd burnout of the year right now. So, kidding. But I mean, it's you know yourself. You know yourself.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great thing. Honestly, that's a great thing to be able to kind of understand yourself that well and be able to kind of expect it.
Well, and it's because it's like, okay, it's kind of like a cyclical thing. It's like, I know I ride it and I ride it hard. And the next thing you know, it's like, okay, like chill out. You need a moment because you're definitely, you're not there, So, I mean, pushing through in those times, a lot of it is I have some great mentors and really wonderful people that are close to me that I can share those moments with, who they can be a sounding board, and they just kind of stop and they say, hey, look, like you have your moment, like whether it's you're sad or whether you're not motivated or whether you're just feeling drained, have your moment, but then remember what you were trying to do. And know that you have to continue showing up for people. So, I mean, and I think a lot of that then will come back to what your purpose is. So for me, I'm not like sharing pictures just for like a good time, but it's like to really try to like help educate people or enlighten people to even just think a different way, whether it's about travel for travelers or whether it's people in the hospitality industry that need a little bit of that, again, that like rejuvenation, that refreshed way of looking at things. So knowing that that's more of the route that I want to go, that's what drives me. It's like, I have to show up for other people. If that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. I mean, especially again, obviously this is a passion of yours, not just Ask a Concierge, but also your concierge work. I mean,
yeah,
you don't get rated. And just for those who don't know, Sarah was, rated the world's best concierge.
I know.
So you don't get that award because, just because you're going into work every day and just having to kind of push yourself through. There's obviously, even on days where it's challenging, you're finding that inner strength to still put that smiling face on. Mm-hmm. And kind of, as you said, hotel work can at times get very monotonous, right? And when I had my
nicely, by the way,
when I used to have my front desk teams, I would tell my associates, someone may be coming to you with a complaint or a request or a question that you've heard 50 times today.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the first time that person has brought it to you. Mm-hmm. So especially as a concierge, I'm sure you've heard, I need to get reservations to this restaurant, that restaurant, the third restaurant. And it's just the same kind of thing over and over. So how do you continue to get that passion, right? And you touched on it a lot. So I'm going to park Ask a Concierge to the side for a second.
Yeah.
Because you talked about your 15 years experience as a concierge and in a major, California market.
Mm-hmm.
And you have that going well. It's the last however many years have been really great for the hotel industry. I'm sure you're, still enjoying that. Obviously, or you probably wouldn't be there, but you have that passion for it.
Mm-hmm.
2019 ends. Everyone's happy. I'm not sure how the first 2 months were of 2020 out in LA, but in New York, it was great.
It was
great.
I was like, oh man, I'm like, we're good. This year is happening.
Yes. So same thing in New York, where we were having parties. We were looking to 2021 in a way. And then obviously March happens and everything falls apart. And unfortunately, like myself, you were a victim of COVID, So how does that kind of go into your mental mindset as you're still developing as a concierge, but now kind of the baseline of all this and something you've been doing for such a long time gets taken away from you?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting to kind of to be like completely transparent with everybody. I was very much working at the hotel, still full time, and Ask a Concierge had grown quite significantly. I mean, and just to be very, very transparent, I was making more doing Ask a Concierge than I was at the hotel. So I knew at some point, I'm like, okay, this is great, by the way. This is amazing. Amazing when you have like your side hustles finally making more than the day job. But then I was also struggling with, I built my brand based off of me being a concierge. How do I navigate that transition? So I was like, I'll know it when the time is right. I don't know yet, but in the meantime, I'm just going to work my butt off because I am crazy. No, because I can right now. and it's like, okay, let's go with that. So I was still really busy, and I had a lot of, I mean, I had deals lined up all through. I was supposed to go speak at a conference in India, then fly to Italy and speak at a conference with Cornell grads in Italy, then come back and do a whole road trip with Marriott. Like March was like, and I was moving. So March was
that too.
That too, you know, but to just like give you an idea, like stuff was what it was popping, as some people like to say, cooler people than me. I won't say that ever again, by the way. It was fun.
It's on my show. I have it on tape.
Oh no. No, but things were great. So then obviously everything comes to a complete halt. And next thing you know, I'm furloughed from the hotel. So I'm like, okay, well, that's one side that I can kind of manage at first. But then I'm like, what's going on with Ask a Concierge? Like, how do I navigate this? Because I am the person that makes content, and it's travel content. So, I mean, in all honesty, I kind of laid low for the first couple of weeks. And when I say laid low, yes, I was still putting out content. You can see I was engaging but I was, it was engaged, but it was maybe one might even say like a little bit more superficially engaged. And then what I was doing is I was really just paying attention to what was happening in the travel space. And on one hand, I was seeing people, they were like, oh, I miss travel. I can't wait to travel again. And I'm like, well, we don't know how long we're going to be in this. Like, I don't participate in that conversation. That's going to get real old real quick. And then, you know, other people are talking about this, and there's a bit of a doom and gloom factor. And as I was really looking, I was like, okay, well, what isn't being covered? And at that time, you know, there was so much that was up in the air. I was like, nobody's really tackling maybe like the progress or the little wins that we're doing in this industry. And especially because I'm so globally connected, because I am still part of these concierge organizations. So it's not uncommon for me to talk to somebody in Spain, to talk to somebody in Kuala Lumpur, to talk to somebody in Tokyo. And why is that important? Because on one hand, all of us are going through the same thing. It's the same storm, different boat. But on the other hand, we're in different phases of it. So seeing and hearing what might be happening in other places, other countries, other hotels can give a little bit of insight, whether it's a glimmer of hope or an idea on how to start recovery. And so that's why I ended up doing basically these industry updates. And it was like, okay, this is at least a piece of something of value that I can add to people in this time. Now, that being said, it took a minute to get there, and it was hard. Like, I'm not going to lie. I definitely was like, what am I doing? How can I give back? Like, how can I be motivated? This is like my world was taken away from me.
So I'm going to pause you for there for a sec. So kind of go into that, right? I mean, I know it was obviously several months ago, but what was kind of that first mindset when all these trips started to fall apart, these speaking engagements started to fall apart? None of it by your fault, right?
Yeah.
What was that mindset that you kind of initially had?
Okay, so the initial mindset was like, okay, preservation mode. It wasn't panic. It was preservation mode, because preservation mode. And then it was like, okay, how do we do? I have a little bit of a fighter mentality. I was like, okay, we're going to make sure we're as healthy as possible. And we're just going to stay like, just be the strong person in this. Now, that being said, like, we're also human, you know, and it's like, then I had moments where I'm like, dude, this is a tough fight. This is a long fight. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Like, whew. So, I mean, my inclination, you know, at first is to like be strong and to like, in essence, like will my way through it. But, you know, then it hits you too. You have the news coming at you with, you know, pandemic this, coronavirus this, blah, 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 you know, and it was a lot. So even though, you know, I was strong and felt strong, I definitely had moments where I'm like, I don't know if I can be strong right now, you know? And so there was a bit of that. But what I ended up doing is, as soon as I was able to anchor myself in doing these updates, and also at the same time, I was part of, or I am still part of this education committee for Les Clés d'Or. And so for those that don't know, Les Clés d'Or, they're the Gold Keys of Concierge, which is the organization that I've been part of. And we have been working to put together an education day for a conference. And obviously the conference didn't happen. So then it was like, what do we do? Well, now we move it online. So all of a sudden I felt I had two things that I could anchor myself in. One was I could help put on these educational events to other concierge that were really struggling all around the world. And the other was also putting together these travel industry updates. And to be honest, giving myself that purpose is what got me through. Before I kind of locked in on those, there were dark days. It was tough. I mean, I also live in Los Angeles, and that was its own whole like slew of challenges. Because at first, the first sort of like slump is, oh, this is a reality. What's going on? Then next year, then you have Black Lives Matter and the protests and everything that happened with that, and then you have another little slump, and then it's like, cool, everybody thinks they're going back to work and we're getting out of this by September. No.
You forgot there was a little thing this year happening too called the election. Just so you guys know, this is obviously going to be posted after we record. Sure. We are currently recording on election night. So we're recording, too early for there to be a definitive winner at this point. Mm-hmm. But obviously that's been a very big emotional drain, no matter which side of the coin you're on, for a lot of people. So that's just one more thing thrown on this crazy year we're having. Totally.
And then, finances as well too. Like it's like as cool as I was finally feeling like I was getting into my stride financially, as far as, starting my own thing. It's like now all of a sudden the rug was pulled out from underneath me, and it's like, oh, cool. Not cool, but oh, great. No hell. And now have to be relying on myself, but my business is in the travel business.
Right.
What? I mean, I can't lie. I mean, it's definitely been a series of ups and downs. And so it's just, my whole thing is, it's like, okay, let yourself have that down moment, but then anchor yourself in that, in what you can do and how you can give back. And that helps.
You said something a little while back about little victories, little wins, and finding those little wins. And now, again, everyone's in a different circumstance, right? So you obviously have Ask a Concierge going on. I'm working on some other stuff, but other people may have different situations, and maybe they're, as you said, financially struggling, and it's a lot of just negativity, right? As we all have been facing. So how were you able to, through your concierge position being eliminated for now, and your Ask a Concierge business losing a lot of that traveling opportunities, and you kind of having to reestablish everything you built over the last 8 years, how are you able to find those little wins? What can people do that are struggling to find those little wins come up and start to see them a little more?
Well, I think it, is to really just start at the basics, and like to take that time to really like write down what's important to you. Like, and maybe it's revisiting your goals that you set for yourself at the beginning of the year. Maybe you look at those goals and you have to modify them. It just kind of depends on what works for you, but just being like really honest with yourself and be like, hey, and also more than being honest with yourself is looking at this as an opportunity. I know that every single one of us can say that we have a list of things that we've always wanted to do, and we just never have time to do it. Whether it's a passion, whether it's, fixing up something around the house, we all have that list. And so I just turned around and looked at it as like, I've been given this opportunity that, okay, yes, finances will be tight. And yes, we're going to have to like really like bootstrap it for right now. I'm definitely not going to glamorize that. That's for sure. But okay, so if I know that at least like the basics are covered, and I can create my own day or create my own, like what I want to work on, what is that? And so if you just are really honest with yourself, I think that can, and then as you like go along and you're like, cool, this, I always wanted to paint. And this year I set up a little like corner in my place, and I'm able to paint. Whatever those little victories are, you have to give yourself a pat on the back for that. And it's kind of amazing how you'll come back around and realize, oh, this is actually cool. Like I'm having these little victories. So maybe it's that mindset of you know, the mindset of having that gratitude for the little things. But if you really take that time to appreciate that, it just helps you in the long run.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, it's certainly been difficult for myself to find some of those little victories, and a lot of it's come with, you know, being able to spend more time with my family, just with the children, right? Or some of the successful stuff that we've done on No Vacancy, or starting this and hopefully turn this into a success, whatever it may be. There are things you can hopefully attach to, but again, you have a really strong growing business that you've been developing again from a long time. It's not something that just happened. So for someone who maybe was, again, tied up in the hotel business and working so hard and seemingly losing their time to it in a way, now that they maybe have that time, right? What would be your advice to someone who's saying, you know what, I want to start something new. I want to try something different. I maybe want to start my business, start a new career path, go back to school, whatever it may be. What's your advice to them to really get motivated to do that if they're not feeling 100% into it because of just the current circumstances?
Well, first of all, I mean, that's a great question. But first of all, know that right now, definitely this year, definitely these months, know that maybe every day you're not going to feel 100%. And know that that is okay. And give yourself a little bit of breathing room, because I mean, I was even just saying to actually my mother right before this, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm finally feeling motivated again. Like for the past 10 days, I felt like I was going through molasses. I was trying to just get motivated, or I would like work for a bit and then I'd have to take a nap in the afternoon. I'm like, why am I taking a nap? This is crazy. Or it's like, I'm like, whoa, I'm definitely hitting that caffeine way too hard, whatever it is. And so know that like everybody's having that. And so ease up on yourself. And then that being said, is that just kind of remind yourself, like at this point, and I think this year has been a huge reminder for that. It's kind of like, if not now, when? Like for real. I mean, for me, for example, you know, I was like, okay, at some point I'm going to, you know, transition and not be at the hotel anymore. But I was holding on for dear life. Like I kept it as training wheels. And I'm like, but you can ride a bike. You don't really need your training wheels. But I'm like, oh, and the next thing you know, I'm furloughed. And I was like, oh, but I'm still on. I'm still on. And the next thing you know, at the end of August, you know, I was basically given the opportunity to come back and have somebody else be let go, or be let go myself. And I was like, I'm not taking somebody else's job right now. Like this is my time to sever those ties. And even though it might've been something that I knew was coming, it was still hard. And I had been working with some properties in Mexico, came back, and I took my stuff out. I went to the hotel, finally cleared my desk out after like almost 6 months of being furloughed, by the way. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm like, does this lip gloss still work? Yeah, I don't know. So it's the simple things. But I came back and I was like, you know what? I have to go spend time with family, because I've been here by myself in Los Angeles and I have to do that and I have to regroup. So I remember that night I booked a flight and I ended up staying with my grandparents and my mother for 3 weeks in Pennsylvania. And I'm like, oh goodness, I can't believe I did this, but I needed that. So the point is, to go back to your question, is know that it is driving in traffic. Look at it as driving in traffic. Some days you're going to be going 60, 80 miles an hour. And some days it's going to be slower, 30 miles an hour. But so long as you just kind of keep moving forward, you know, life is an ebb and flow. But just have that mindset of like, if not now, when? Because like really, I mean, what has 2020 showed us?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's obviously a lot of different sides to that equation, right? Because there's also people that their passion is in hospitality and they want nothing more than to just get back into that industry, whether it's in hotels, travel agencies, cruises, whatever it happens to be. I'm going to do the worst thing an interviewer can do. And I'm going to ask you a closed-ended question. So I
Okay.
just want a yes or a no, and I'll tell you why after you answer this. But I'm going to be
Okay.
presumptuous as well. 2 cardinal sins. Here we go. On the second
Oh.
show, I'm diving right into the playbook of what not to do.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
I'm going to assume, especially as you started Ask a Concierge, and you're trying to work with people and trying to get people to buy into you, and you don't have that established persona yet, that you faced a lot of rejection, a lot of no's. Would you say yes or no?
No.
Okay, well then
later. I'll explain later. Well, I know you wanted a yes or no, but I can explain.
Well, the reason I was asking that is because a lot of people are interviewing, right? Or I should say applying for positions, and they're throwing out 50, 100 applications, whether they're in the industry or not, and they're just trying to get a job, and they're facing so many rejections because the talent pool is so wide right now.
Yeah, totally.
How can you kind of break through that negative feeling of rejection and that, it's just continuous over and over and over and over?
So first, and I'll explain why I said no.
I want to hear it. It's going to be awesome.
I want to hear it. So first of all, here's the thing: is that honest. Okay, let's be real. There have definitely been a lot of rejections for sure. I said no because I didn't harp on them. So it's like it happened, and it's like moved on. Like yeah, I mean, and it's probably countless, but it's just like the way it's my favorite line. You can't credit me, but it does exist out there, is it's not rejection, it's redirection. And so it's like, anytime I heard that, it was like, okay, no, fine. But what I did at the beginning, and this is, I think, really important when it comes to branding. At the beginning, I wasn't really like, you didn't see a lot of, yes, I had videos, but as far as like the content that I was pushing out all the time, it wasn't really about me, but it was about what I was like, my recommendations or what I was sharing. So it was about that. So when I was starting it, I let the brand, in essence, open the door. So because the name of my brand was Ask a Concierge, and at the time, Ask a Concierge Los Angeles, all of a sudden people were like, oh, a concierge, Los Angeles, she'd be great to have in the conversation. So very early on, I'm like, how am I doing like by the way, this was Twitter chat time, but like, how am I doing a Twitter chat with like 4 Seasons and Ritz-Carlton? Like, it's just me. But it was because it was the brand. So I think that's something that's really important, is at the beginning, let the brand be bigger than you. Because at that point, nobody gives a shit who Sarah Dandashy is. By the way, I'm sorry if we can curse.
No, perfectly fine.
It's after 6 p.m.
We're off the clock here. It's fine. We're just having a conversation as friends. It's election night. There's so much going on. A couple curse words is not going to be the end of the world.
No. Well, I always laugh too, because I call it Sassy Sarah. It's like after hours, and then like it gets crazy. So yeah, we like that. So, I wasn't afraid to let the brand be bigger than me, and to use it it's all about leveraging. And so it was trying to use the brand to kind of get in and have those conversations. Whereas now, or maybe even at some point, I mean, I've had people say, oh, when are you just going to be Sarah Dandashy? And it's like, I don't know. I'm not there yet. But, so if you kind of use your brand as leverage and you're smart about it, it's amazing how you can get into into conversations online. Now, that being said, there's going to be rejection for sure. But it's like nobody ever, I'm not going to use any sports references. That's bad.
I'm a big sports person. Go for it.
Yeah, but I'll probably like, no, I'm not a big sports person. So, but obviously, like, okay, fine, we'll use basketball. How many times do people miss shots before they actually like start making shots? Like, it's all about practice, And so it's like, you just kind of go and you do that. And it's also being mindful as far as like what you're bringing to the table and maybe who you're reaching out to. So you just have to have that real, honest conversation. Like, are you going to go fresh out the gate and be like, cool, I'm going to launch a podcast. Let me call up Gary V. He doesn't know who I am, and like, see if he'll do an interview with me. That's a really random example, but like, you have to work your way to it. And what I've found that's been so cool with social media, and why I've always been such a proponent of it, is the connections and the people that you can make. And you make these connections with these people via social media, and next thing you know, you have some sort of relationship. So once you have that relationship, you can be like, hey, do you want to do this with me? Or do you want to do this podcast? Or would you do whatever it is? It's amazing how many people are willing to do that? And so it's like, you just kind of keep working and trying, and just know that whenever you have an ask, make sure that the other person gets something out of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just the ask to take, but
Absolutely.
that they're getting something out of it.
No, absolutely. And for people that don't want to start a podcast or don't want to get into the medium, right?
Sure.
Sarah's talking about her brand and Ask a Concierge, but everybody out there has a personal brand. Would you agree with that? So
100%.
As you're job searching, as you're networking on social media, whether it be LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever it may be, in that job hunt, sell your personal brand, right? Sell your story. And that's kind of the point of Be My Guest, right? We're telling stories, right? We're just telling our stories. And your personal brand is your story. Why is your personal brand more influential than somebody else? And kind of cutting through that, right? We live in the world of ATS systems and mindless applications where you punch in your resume and then have to type it in after that. So how can you leverage that personal brand? Leverage your, especially in hospitality, you're most likely a people person for the most part. Reach out to these people on LinkedIn, find out, do the extra step. It goes a very long way. I can tell you from personal experience that if you apply for a position, find out who the recruiter is, find out who the hiring manager is, and then make a direct connection. That's your personal brand right there. It doesn't have to be a company. It doesn't have to be a TV show. It doesn't have to be a podcast. By the way, I started a podcast and reached out to Sarah, and she was gracious enough to join me. So she's living proof of what she says. But your personal brand is whatever you've done in your life, whether it's career-wise, personal life. Use that to your leverage and take that extra step from just the monotonous applications. And I think it will actually encourage you more because you're doing something with yourself versus, again, just sitting there in front of a computer for 2 hours or whatever it is,
For sure.
hitting apply, hitting apply, hitting apply. You're getting yourself out of that mundane routine. So Sarah, real quick, if I can ask you one more thing, I would love for you to say that quote again. I thought that was great. So if anybody that missed that, I want to hear it again.
Oh, it's a great one. So it's not rejection, it's redirection. And I love that because because then you don't harp on it. You don't harp. Look, here's the thing. You're going to knock on a gazillion doors. That's just the reality of it. And I just want to touch on a couple things. So we've talked about so many things, but just to reiterate, also, especially if you are in, hospitality and this, and you're trying to find your way right now, right now it's about, dare we say, whether it's about survival. And maybe you have this realization that maybe you want to switch gears entirely and go do something else. Take the pressure off of yourself and be okay with that. You don't have to go back and do exactly what you did before. And you can also, maybe hotels might be difficult right now, but you get creative, and maybe you can still use your same skills in, like a nursing home, like an old folks home or something like that. They're probably not called that these days. I'm sorry if I offended anybody. But
it's past 6, it's fine.
Yes, exactly. And then leverage. I said it, you said it. I want to talk about leverage again, because we all have that thing about us that makes us just a little bit different, and you double down on that. Case in point, why, as I was growing my brand on like Instagram, be very obvious, I was creating content for travelers. How was I different than any other blonde girl on Instagram taking pictures at a destination? By the way, they're lovely people, but I wanted to add more substance. I was like, we can take a pretty photo. That's fine. But like, how do we add more substance? And so what I had all these years of hotel experience. So I doubled down on being the hotel girl in that sort of travel influencer space. Now with the pandemic, I really amped up playing on LinkedIn. I had LinkedIn before, and I was like, I should always get to putting stuff on LinkedIn, and I never did. And now all of a sudden I'm like, cool, well, let's double down on LinkedIn. And I'm obviously like the hospitality person, but like nobody has what I have in the background, as far as like whether you could argue it's the travel influencer space or that content creating space. So let's double down on that it's not just a hotel person, but I have all of that coming to the table. So again, it's all a game of leverage. And it just goes to show you that it's a constant game of leverage, that what I'm doing now might have been different than what I was doing in January, certainly different than what I was doing last October. Right. So And it's enriching because you just kind of like you flow with it. So and don't be too shy about building out your personal brand, because people want to hire you. They want to work with you. I had to just talk to a very close friend of mine who was like, yeah, I don't really want to share that much about myself. And I'm like, why would then anybody care about your business? Because there's a zillion other businesses out there that are doing exactly what you do. You are the selling point. They want to work with you. So share a bit. And whatever you're comfortable with. You don't have to share like your blood type or whatever. I mean, you can if you want. But I mean, it's like, you know.
That was my next question to you, honestly.
Oh, fine. I am O positive. Oh, my gosh.
I had to make sure I got that in before we finished up. But Sarah, this has been extremely enlightening, right? From someone who has developed a successful brand, both personally, professionally, and certainly your actual Ask a Concierge brand. So where can we find you? If anybody who hasn't seen you before, and I don't know who that could possibly be, you're missing out. Where can they find you and start getting their daily dose of Sarah?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can find me on pretty much all social media handles as Ask a Concierge, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, as well as YouTube. And then feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my name, Sarah Dandashy. Not an easy one, but whatever. We're representing the Lebanese side. So Sarah Dandashy. And then my website is askaconcierge.tv. So reach out.
Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time tonight. I really appreciate you kind of supporting me from just being on the second episode again with no proof of concepts, but it does mean a lot to me, especially from someone of your stature. So thank you very much for being my guest. And obviously we have a lot more work to do on some other projects.
Yes, we do. We do.
So stay tuned to my stuff, because you'll see Sarah on that stuff. And then you get more Sarah. And anytime you get more Sarah, it's a good day.
Oh my gosh. Can I use that as a tagline? I'm taking that.
Absolutely. I'm going to steal your quote. You can steal that. That's perfectly fine. I'll cut it out for you and send it over.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Well, that's a really great number 2 episode, I think. I mean, you heard into the minds of an entrepreneur, right? And that's what we all are, especially now in 2020, is entrepreneurs for ourselves. Whether you're looking to get another job, whether you're starting another business, whether you're going to a different industry, right? You have to sell yourself. You have to have that personal branding. And Sarah really made a great point there about letting the rejections, not ignoring them, but trying to let them roll off. You know, it's very hard to take them not take them personally, because in theory, they're rejecting you, right? But it's not always about you. Sometimes there's just a better candidate. There's 1,000 people applying for the same job, right? Take a breath, understand that your value as a professional, your value as a person does not rely on just that particular application or the several different applications or the 100 different applications that you may have thrown out there. It's not easy. I can't say I haven't fallen down that trap at times, but the whole idea of it's not rejection, it's redirection. I've never heard that before, but I'm going to definitely be stealing that, because that is a quote that should be on everyone's wall that is either applying for jobs or not. That's something to just keep in mind no matter what you do, that it's a lesson, it's an opportunity, and it's a way to potentially move into something better. So thank you again to all of you for being my guest, whether you're watching us online or catching the iTunes podcast. Again, this is episode number 2, so a lot more to go, a lot of great stuff coming back. Please give me some feedback. And if you want to join, as I said, this is an open forum. There's nobody denied. I just want you to reach out to me on LinkedIn. So you can see on the screen my profile. If you're listening, it's linkedin.com/in/D Mignano. My name is David Mignano, Mignano. So I'm pretty easy to find online. Just look for the doofy guy in the suit with the short haircut. Other than that, appreciate you guys joining me. Looking forward to episode number 3 coming up soon with another great guest. And we will be back on that time. Stay positive out there.